Because when making life or death, war or peace decisions, a president just can't pop off or lash out irrationally.
It's no secret that Donald Trump has a complicated relationship with criticism, especially when it comes from high-profile figures. But when Michelle Obama recently made some pointed remarks that many interpreted as being directed at him, the reaction was swift and entirely predictable. Trump, known for responding sharply to any perceived slight, took it personally. What followed was a wave of public statements, social media posts, and heated commentary that reignited the long-standing tension between the two public figures. Trump has never taken well to being challenged, particularly by people who hold wide public admiration. And Michelle Obama isn't just admired. She's respected across political lines for her intelligence, poise, and authenticity. That combination makes her a uniquely powerful voice in American culture. So when she speaks out on leadership, values, or public service, people listen. Her words often resonate in a way that few others can match. Her recent comments touched on topics like integrity in leadership, the importance of moral character, and the strength of a supportive partnership. While she never mentioned Trump by name, many observers noted the contrast she drew between what she described as strong, value-based leadership and the more self-serving brand of politics often associated with the former president. It didn't take long for speculation to start. Was this a subtle dig? Was she drawing a direct line between her experience in public life and Trump's time in office? If the reaction from Trump is any indication, he certainly took it that way. According to people close to him, he was furious. Reports described him pacing and venting, upset not just about the content of her remarks, but about the attention they received. For someone who has long seen himself as the center of the political universe, being outshined by someone who didn't even mention him must have stung. Trump's relationship with the Obamas has always been complicated. For years, he was one of the most vocal proponents of the false birther conspiracy theory, which questioned Barack Obama's citizenship despite clear evidence to the contrary. Even after Obama released his long-form birth certificate in 2011, Trump continued to cast doubt. Many saw this not just as a political tactic, but as something more personal, a way to undermine the legitimacy of the country's first black president. Michelle Obama has spoken candidly in the past about how hurtful and racially charged those attacks felt. In that context, her more recent public remarks take on additional weight. Rather than confront Trump's past behavior directly, she has often chosen to highlight the kind of leadership she believes the country deserves, one rooted in respect, empathy, and personal responsibility. It's a message that many find refreshing, especially when compared to Trump's often combative and performative style. Michelle's delivery is also part of what makes her so effective. She doesn't need to raise her voice or engage in personal attacks. She speaks with clarity and calm, often grounding her points in personal experience. Whether she's discussing childhood nutrition, access to education, or the dynamics of her own marriage, she presents herself with sincerity and thoughtfulness. That authenticity is one of the reasons she consistently ranks among the most admired women in the world. In contrast, Trump's public responses tend to be reactive. He often takes to social media, especially platforms like Truth Social, to air his grievances, sometimes in all caps, with frequent exclamation marks, and a tone that swings between defensive and aggressive. His responses to Michelle Obama's recent comments were no different. He accused her of being divisive and jealous, terms he has used before when confronted by strong women in the public eye. This pattern isn't new. Trump has frequently clashed with high-profile women, particularly those who are assertive, well-spoken, or critical of him. From political figures like Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris, to journalists and even celebrities, his responses often follow a familiar script: question their intelligence, attack their character, or accuse them of being nasty, a word he has used multiple times to describe female critics. Michelle Obama, however, tends to avoid engaging directly with those tactics. Her approach has always been different. As First Lady, she famously adopted the mantra, "When they go low, we go high." While some critics have argued that this strategy is too passive in the face of aggressive rhetoric, Others see it as a form of quiet strength. It allows her to maintain her credibility and integrity while still making her views known. She doesn't respond to every jab or insult, and in doing so, she often ends up looking more composed and in control than those who lash out. What's also important to note is the broader public reaction to this dynamic. When Michelle Obama speaks, it often sparks serious discussion, not just about the content of her message, but about the role of public figures in shaping political culture. Her emphasis on values like decency, humility, and collaboration stands in stark contrast to the kind of politics many people have grown weary of: aggressive, divisive, and focused more on headlines than solutions. Trump's reaction to her remarks illustrates how fragile that political image can be when confronted with a figure who doesn't play by the same rules. He thrives on confrontation, on being at the center of a media storm. But when someone like Michelle Obama speaks calmly and confidently without naming names, it leaves little room for him to fight back in the way he's used to. And that seems to frustrate him more than anything. Part of what makes this all so compelling is that it's not just about two public figures with differing opinions. It's about what they represent. Michelle Obama is widely seen as a symbol of thoughtfulness, compassion, and grounded leadership. Trump, on the other hand, is often associated with a more performative, conflict-driven approach to power. The contrast between them is not just personal. It reflects two very different visions for how public leadership should look. There's also the element of race and gender, which can't be ignored. As a black woman, Michelle Obama has had to navigate immense scrutiny, often being held to higher standards than her counterparts. She's talked openly about the pressure to appear perfect in order to avoid unfair criticism. And yet, despite those challenges, she has remained composed, articulate, and widely respected. For some, that level of success and public admiration is threatening, especially to someone like Trump, who often appears to measure self-worth through public attention and adoration. When Melania Trump delivered her first major speech at the 2016 Republican National Convention, most people expected the usual introduction from a potential First Lady: personal stories, values, and support for her husband's campaign. But what unfolded was something entirely unexpected. Almost immediately, observers noticed that significant parts of her speech sounded oddly familiar. It didn't take long before people realized that several lines had been lifted almost word for word from Michelle Obama's 2008 speech at the Democratic National Convention. It wasn't subtle either. Phrases about the importance of hard work, honesty, and dignity were identical. Side-by-side video comparisons quickly spread across social media, television news, and late-night shows. Within hours, the story had become a media frenzy. Commentators pointed out that Melania, knowingly or not, had repeated nearly a paragraph of Michelle Obama's speech verbatim. The incident sparked jokes, memes, and widespread discussion about originality, public image, and the stark contrast between the two women. Initially, there was some confusion about how it had happened. The Trump campaign responded by denying that any plagiarism had occurred. In their view, the similarities were coincidental and the media was exaggerating the issue. Eventually, a speechwriter took responsibility, but by then, the damage had been done. The story wasn't just about a mistake in a speech, it became symbolic of something bigger. To many, the incident highlighted the very different ways Michelle and Melania had approached their roles in the public eye. Michelle Obama's speeches had always been deeply personal, well-articulated, and grounded in her own life experiences. Her words often reflected years of work in education, public health, and advocacy. Melania, on the other hand, had entered the spotlight more suddenly and with far less political experience. Her speech, whether or not the plagiarism was intentional, appeared to borrow from someone whose public persona she seemed to emulate, consciously or not. As the months and years went on, the comparisons didn't stop at the speech. People began to notice a series of overlapping style choices, messaging, and even initiatives. Michelle Obama's Let's Move campaign, which focused on child nutrition and combating obesity, was mirrored in Melania's Be Best campaign, a program that broadly promoted children's well-being, online behavior, and anti-bullying. Though the topics were not identical, the tone and goals were close enough that comparisons became unavoidable. Critics were quick to point out the irony. Melania had made cyberbullying one of her central issues, despite her husband being one of the most prolific and aggressive users of Twitter during his presidency. The contradiction didn't go unnoticed by the public or the media. Meanwhile, Michelle Obama's initiatives had focused more on community engagement and systemic change, including efforts to improve school lunches and promote healthy lifestyles across the country. Her campaigns were widely supported by data, educational resources, and partnerships with schools and local governments. The visual comparisons also drew attention. Whether intentional or not, Melania was frequently seen in outfits that closely resembled iconic looks previously worn by Michelle Obama. From sleeveless dresses to structured coats and color palettes, online fashion commentators and political analysts alike pointed out repeated similarities. Some suggested it was simply coincidence. Others felt it was a strategic move to channel the former First Lady's popularity and style. Fashion is often part of how First Ladies communicate, especially since they are generally expected to remain nonpartisan in their public messaging. Michelle Obama used fashion to express strength, accessibility, and confidence. She supported American designers, balanced elegance with simplicity, and made a clear statement about modern leadership. Melania Trump, too, became known for her fashion choices, many of which were bold and high-end, but the overlap in style raised questions. Was it admiration, emulation, or just an unavoidable comparison in the public eye? It's worth noting that Melania Trump rarely responded to these comparisons. She has maintained a reserved public presence, often speaking through carefully prepared statements or short public appearances. Her reluctance to directly address controversies may have been strategic, or simply her personal preference. But in contrast to Michelle Obama's openness and frequent media engagement, Melania's approach came across as distant, which only amplified the differences between the two. Over time, public perception became clearer. Michelle Obama was viewed as a trailblazer, a first lady who used her platform to champion major national causes while maintaining her own identity and voice. Melania Trump, by contrast, was often seen as struggling to define her role beyond the shadow of her husband's presidency and the legacy of the woman who came before her. This wasn't necessarily due to any personal failing on Melania's part, but rather the result of two very different women navigating very different circumstances under the same job title. Another key distinction was how they approached the spotlight. Michelle Obama was known for embracing it, using media appearances, speeches, and interviews to connect with the public. She appeared regularly on talk shows, hosted community events, and worked closely with schools and nonprofits. Her background as a lawyer and community organizer came through in her approach to public service. Melania, on the other hand, preferred a more private life and seemed visibly uncomfortable in the political arena. While she supported various initiatives, her impact was often overshadowed by the controversies surrounding her husband. What made the ongoing comparisons even more striking was how differently each woman talked about marriage and partnership. Michelle often spoke candidly about her relationship with Barack Obama, discussing the ups and downs of marriage, parenting, and balancing work and family life. She painted a picture of a partnership rooted in mutual respect and shared purpose. These personal insights helped humanize the presidency and made her relatable to millions of Americans. By contrast, Donald and Melania Trump's relationship has frequently been scrutinized in the media for its lack of warmth and connection in public appearances. From the infamous hand-swatting moments to their often separate schedules and body language, many observers pointed out what appeared to be a noticeable emotional distance between them. While it's important not to overanalyze personal relationships, the contrast was hard to ignore when placed side by side with the Obamas' visible closeness and chemistry. This difference carried through to how they uplifted their spouses in public. Michelle Obama regularly highlighted Barack's strengths, from his leadership to his empathy and his ability to stay calm under pressure. Her support felt genuine and heartfelt. In contrast, when Melania spoke publicly about her husband, the tone was often more scripted and formal, rarely touching on emotional or personal anecdotes. In political culture, image matters. The role of the First Lady may be unofficial, but it's highly influential. First Ladies often become symbolic of the administration's tone and values. In that light, Michelle Obama set a high bar, not only through her policy work, but through her character and public presence. Melania Trump stepped into that role during one of the most polarized times in American politics, under intense scrutiny and with limited political experience. While the expectations were perhaps unfairly high, the inevitable comparisons to her predecessor made her job even more difficult. Still, it's important to recognize that both women faced unique challenges. Michelle Obama dealt with constant attacks and criticism, particularly early in her time as First Lady, much of which was racially motivated and deeply unfair. She responded by staying focused on her work and speaking openly about her experiences. Melania Trump, meanwhile, faced the challenge of being married to one of the most divisive figures in modern politics while trying to find her own space in a highly charged environment. Both had to navigate the role on their own terms, but public opinion has been far more favorable toward one than the other. Michelle Obama's ability to speak powerfully without ever raising her voice is something that has come to define her public persona. Whether she's talking about leadership, partnership, or values, her words consistently carry weight, not because they are loud or inflammatory, but because they are thoughtful, measured, and grounded in lived experience. That's likely one reason why Donald Trump's reaction to her most recent comments seemed so outsized in comparison. As usual, his response arrived on social media, full of capital letters, exclamation marks, and emotional overtones. It was less a rebuttal and more a familiar performance. In Trump's political playbook, confrontation is often the go-to move. But what made this moment stand out was the fact that Michelle Obama hadn't directly criticized him. She didn't name names. She didn't insult or accuse. She simply described what integrity, partnership, and effective leadership look like, and let the public draw their own conclusions. That strategy worked. The contrast between her calm delivery and Trump's reactive outbursts was striking. Online, people quickly picked up on the irony. The more Trump lashed out, the more attention Michelle's original comments received. Her message, which didn't need shouting or personal attacks, was amplified by the very response it triggered. This is a pattern that has played out more than once during the Obama-Trump era, with Trump often appearing rattled by the Obama's ability to draw admiration without engaging in political mudslinging. Public reaction once again highlighted the difference in how the two figures are perceived. Michelle Obama's remarks were widely praised, both in the media and by ordinary citizens. Many people described feeling inspired or moved by her words. Others noted how rare it was to see a public figure express values like humility, respect, and emotional intelligence in such a composed way. Trump's posts, by contrast, were seen by many as defensive and unnecessarily aggressive. Comedians and late-night hosts were quick to weigh in, turning Trump's responses into punchlines. Social media users created memes, clips, and comparisons that played up the divide between Michelle's grace and Trump's volatility. Some users pointed out the irony that a speech about dignity and mutual respect could spark such an intense backlash. It almost proved the point she hadn't explicitly made. This response isn't new. Over the years, Michelle Obama has consistently managed to avoid being drawn into petty public arguments, choosing instead to focus on broader issues and personal reflections. This approach has helped maintain her reputation as a respected voice in American life. Trump's approach, on the other hand, often draws attention through controversy and spectacle, an effective political strategy for rallying a base, but one that tends to alienate more moderate or undecided audiences. In the end, Michelle Obama's refusal to engage in direct confrontation may be her most effective form of commentary. Her silence, combined with her ability to articulate a vision of leadership rooted in compassion and strength, speaks volumes. In contrast, Trump's public reactions, often filled with personal grievances, only serve to highlight the difference in how each chooses to lead, communicate, and respond to criticism. And perhaps that is what resonates most with the public. Michelle Obama doesn't need to win the argument. She simply shows a different path forward, and trusts that people are paying attention.